My name is Daphne B. Solas. I'm a senior manager for Supply Chain Resource Center, and I've been in the current company for about 11 years. I handle the corporate supply chain group of this company, concerning or ranging on functions between systems, logistics, commodity management, and other corporate tools. So my organization is mainly the corporate supply chain, and the projects that we usually handle are projects concerning supply chain systems, onboarding of new sites, and usually this would be affecting the entire global corporate supply chain organizations in this company. One particular project that I could probably share is onboarding of new sites into our supply chain systems. In a typical day, usually a lot of my staff would be involved in several meetings or calls from customers or clients. These are internal business unit people within this company, and these calls and meetings would range from implementation of new projects or maintenance. It could also range on or touch on user specific needs such as access to systems, um, trainings, and process improvement is also part of those meetings and discussions. What I enjoy about managing projects, first is really meeting new people. So for especially on the project that I mentioned, which is onboarding of new sites, it's an opportunity for me as well as my team to meet new people, not just here locally in Manila, but also in the various sites or facilities globally. So with that, we get to interact with different people, different cultures, and also at different levels of the organization. So that's the part that I enjoy most, since by having those meetings, we create connections and network with these people. In terms of challenges, basically because these sites are located globally, one major challenge would be the language, in 2 points. One is in communication. So especially if the site that we're about to onboard is in a region that's not English speaking, so the communication between the customer and my team, me included, would at times start off difficult because of the language barrier. And the second part is, since we're dealing with data, so some of the data that they have are not in the usual US alphabet. So translating those data into US standards or US alphabet posed as a challenge because a lot of our standards are based on the usual US alphabet and numbers, and converting those information to US characters could pose data quality or data accuracy issues in onboarding their data into the systems. In terms of a project that we have to abandon, I can think of one, and that is migrating of current application to Oracle. So back then, we were doing our analysis and due diligence on getting the data and requirements as we migrate to Oracle. However, we have to abandon the project or stop the project because back then the features that we're looking for were not readily available. And those were the features that are critical in our business. So even if the migration to a more stable, should I say, or a more advanced application seemed appropriate. However, since our major requirement was not available in that application, then we have no choice but to stop the said project. So how do I handle my team? Well, these are usually, some of them are already senior in their role and some would be new. So it's a mix of giving a lot of free hand to the more senior ones and a close oversight with the new ones. Of course, there are instances wherein team members may be difficult or would have a different attitude than expected. But what I do is usually to talk to them one-on-one and get to the root cause of where the negativity is coming from. It could be a personal issue which we talk about, and I would coach my staff to set it aside, or it could be work related, meaning to say it could be a disagreement with a peer or a fit, meaning to say a fit in the job. So I could have assigned him or her a function that is not his or her strength, and the person is having difficulty, which is why I'm receiving the negativity. So in those cases, my goal is really to identify the root cause and help the person address it. We would agree on development plans, for example, until such time that we get to the person to be on board with the project again. Of course, in the projects that we do, which is the onboarding, we would encounter stakeholders who are difficult. It could be they would have a different set of standards, or normally the disagreements would be on the timeline. So in our end, we have already a defined timeline, but the stakeholder might have a more aggressive timeline. So in those instances, we would try to explain to the stakeholder why our timeline is such and the benefit to them if we follow our own timeline. However, I also make it a point to listen to their point of view as to why they would have a more aggressive timeline. If I find that their timeline or the aggressiveness of timeline is critical, then me and my team would sit down and look for opportunities where we could come up with an agreement with the stakeholder. Normally, if we are able to listen to the customers, to the stakeholders, they would soften, or they would consider and listen to us as well. So through that, we were able to manage those projects, even if we had challenges in the first few phases of the project. Working with different cultures is very imminent in our team, since we're working with global teams. Of course, at first, if it's a new person, the difficulty on language and understanding is really there. But over time, since typically for a project, there's a regular weekly call. So over time, we'd get to understand them. Sometimes the choice of words could be different and could be interpreted differently. But over time, we get to understand them and really get into an agreement when it comes to the projects. Now, it would be good if those stakeholders would come visit us here in Manila. It's really different to have personal meetings, putting a name on or a face on the voice. It's really makes the working on the project more easier. and establishing a more professional relationship with the stakeholders, regardless of which culture or country they come from, is more effective and helpful. How did I become a project manager? So when I started my career here in this company, I was actually an analyst. And then over time, I got to be promoted to an administrator of one of our supply chain systems. And that was when I started to be involved in those projects. And then eventually, I get to lead the entire team. And I would say that was when my project management role really came in. Um, it I couldn't say that I foresee it that way. It just happened as my career progressed. But with each of the project that I was able to start with, participating in at first and eventually leading it, I get to learn a lot more things. And leading the project also opened up a lot more opportunities for me as well, professionally and personally. So I get to meet new people. I get to look into a certain project in different perspectives, not just from a perspective of a system or a project owner, but also you get to see it from a financial standpoint, for example, organizational standpoint, the impact to not just my team or my company, but also to the customers. So being a project manager opens up all those learning opportunities and career opportunities as well. For professionals or students who would like to pursue a project management role, um, I would say any project at the start, no matter how small or big it is, grab the opportunity to be part of it. Usually it starts with you having probably a small role, but take that as an opportunity or as your first step towards project management. Over time, you get to notice that your role starts to expand, and eventually, if you're successful in those roles, eventually the opportunity to become the project manager would naturally come in. In terms of education or training, I think all trainings and education would allow you to be a project manager. Again, it's the opportunity. Because everybody, I think, works on a certain project. Your role would just be depending on your current status, but focus on your learning, focus on how the project manager in your project is, get to learn from him or her. If you see that the person is good in a certain area, try to evaluate yourself. What would you do or what do you need to do to get into that role? Collaboration is also important, and take advantage of the opportunity of working with those people, because who knows, in the future you may get to work with the same people, and you may already be the project manager by then. So by getting to know them, knowing their strengths, knowing their skills, puts you in an advantage on how you better manage your team, and at the same time develop the habit of networking and collaboration, like I mentioned earlier, and also at the same time continue to improve yourself. So grab each opportunity to learn, technically or personally, and eventually you'd get to manage your own project and be a project manager, a successful one from there. Biggest lessons I've learned from being a project manager, probably one of these would be that your role can change. One day you could be playing a small role, the next day you could be the manager, you could be leading it, or the other way around. But regardless, no matter what your role is, you always have to give in your best, because at the end of the day, the success of the project would really depend on not just the project manager, but each of the team members. So no matter how good the project manager is, if the members or those that support the project manager are not doing their job well, the project would really be affected. So that's one. The other lesson is, grab the opportunity to really learn and connect with people through the projects. So being a project manager opens up opportunities, not just to learn about the project or enhance your skill, but at the same time, it allows you to meet new people, learn new skills. In my team, get to meet people outside the office from different cultures, and also at different levels of the organization. So I use that as my network, and use that also as your pool of resources, such that in the future, if you would need someone or a certain number of people in certain requirements, at least you would have your pool of resources to look at. And last learning, each project is different. So no matter how big or small the project may seem, each of them pose different challenges and a different problem, which gives you the chance to look into different strategies. So there's no one foolproof solution in project management. It's really about understanding your customers, your stakeholders, understanding your project, what your project is all about, and also understanding your role in that project. And eventually, you and your team, as well as your stakeholders, would be able to find the right solution and the right timing to your project. So those were the learnings I have for being a project manager.